Hello, good evening, and welcome to In Focus. Our topics tonight. Syria stands at a crossroads as both Arab and global powers convene in Jordan to address escalating crises and mounting pressures. While Russia and China advocate for peace, Israeli airstrikes cast uncertainty over Syria's future. Meanwhile, the Israel and Gaza war continues to intensify, with protests in Tel Aviv, airstrikes on Gaza and Lebanon, and rising international concern. Diplomatic calls for a fair Palestinian settlement, including efforts by Egypt and China, add urgency to the region's instability. On another front, the Russia-Ukraine conflict deepens with heavy bombardments, retaliatory strikes, and growing tensions near NATO borders as global leaders debate possible paths to peace. But let's begin with the latest developments in Syria. So the regional dynamics are shifting, with major powers recalibrating their strategies in a newly uncertain Syria. The New York Times has reported that despite the fall of Bashar al-Assad, foreign powers such as Israel and the US continue airstrikes in Syria. Israel targets Iranian and Hezbollah assets, while the US focuses on preventing the resurgence of ISIS in the power vacuum. Meanwhile, the Financial Times has reported that Russia, which has long supported Assad, is withdrawing some of its forces, raising questions about its future role in Syria. This follows the loss of Assad's government, but Russia may seek to maintain its strategic bases in the region. Iran's influence also wanes as its key ally falls. Now, providing analysis about the latest updates concerning the Syrian situation, joining us from Cairo is Dr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist. Welcome to our program. Syria's caretaker government has called on the UN to address Israeli airstrikes. What are the chances of international intervention?
Thank you, Mark, for having me. The chances are next to none. No one will move an inch if we are speaking of the effective international community, someone who can actually do anything about it, meaning the United States or the United Kingdom or France as the three Western permanent members of the UN Security Council, or even the European Union or Germany. No one will move a toe in order to prevent Israel's blatant and ongoing aggression and unwarranted aggression against Syria. And on the other hand, countries like Russia and China, even though they deplore and they condemn sometimes and they express their concern about the situation and about Israel's activities, they are not going really to do anything to stop the Israelis and their expansionist policies, unfortunately. It seems that Israel is taking advantage of the humongous vacuum that the fall of the Assad regime and the Syrian state and the Syrian military has left inside Syria. And this huge vacuum is allowing them to basically dismantle the Syria's military infrastructure with the sole purpose, in my view, of denying Syria the ability to militarize itself once more, meaning that if this new government, for example, decides to reconstitute or reestablish the armed forces and call the former officers and soldiers to service, they will not be able to maintain a coherent military force due to the destruction of the military infrastructure. And of course, this also serves Israel's expansionist actions inside Syria, as now they are marching into Syrian territories unresisted and without any significant resistance. And they are still undertaking their land grab over there in complete violation of international law.
And of course, Jordan hosting the Arab Ministerial Conference and putting forward key recommendations and demands. Chief among them was safeguarding Syrian sovereignty and also a political transition in line with UN Resolution 2254. What's your assessment?
Yeah, my assessment is, of course, the first one, the first point that you mentioned out of the about 15 or 20 recommendations and demands made by the Arab Ministerial Summit's final statement or press release. What they said regarding state sovereignty, it relates to the previous question, meaning that they are telling the Israelis that they will not accept any, or they will not recognize any of the land grabs Israel is undertaking at the moment. And the same message is even directed to, for example, a country like Turkey, who is who attended today's conference, especially that there are suspicions that Turkey might have territorial ambitions inside northern Syria. And of course, all the talk of partition and maybe potential Kurdish statehood or Druze autonomy and all of these ideas floating around, the Arab countries are making it clear that they support a united, unitary Syria under one national government with its territorial integrity safeguarded. That's the first point. The second point, and that is they're stressing that the necessity of a political transition. And I think this is a direct message to the current caretaker government dominated and controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, telling them that you need to be more inclusive and that you need to embrace all segments and political forces and social forces and religions and sects and ethnic groups of Syria, especially that the entire caretaker government is dominated by members of HTS, and they are creating a constituent assembly right now in order to amend the constitution without consulting anyone at this moment. And of course, we know that this movement and its allies are of the jihadi Islamist inclination. They are fundamentalist Islamists. So if they decide to move forward with implementing their vision of Syria's political future unilaterally, we might find another Taliban-style state in our hand in the Levant. So I think this is very important. This is something that causes great concern to the Arab countries and most of the international community, to be honest, including Western countries. So that's why they are stressing that the political transition needs to be undertaken within the premise of Resolution 2254 of Security Council.
Concern indeed. Let's move on to the worsening humanitarian crisis. According to reports, 70% of Syrian children are in distress in some way. What is the role of international organizations like the Red Cross? What role can they play in this situation?
Of course, they are already undertaking a very important role that needs to be expanded and reinforced. Not only the Red Cross, all of the humanitarian NGOs and UN agencies as well need to step in and need to be supported full-heartedly by anyone, by all countries that are capable of providing financial assistance. And the new Syrian government and all the Syrian political forces and the armed factions need to facilitate the work of these humanitarian organizations because, as you know, 13 million people have been displaced in Syria. 7 million of them are displaced abroad as refugees, some of them living in abysmal conditions in some countries in refugee camps, for example, like in Lebanon and other countries. And there are over 7 million people displaced inside. In the last round of fighting from the 27th of November until December 8th, 1.1 million people were displaced from their homes within a span of 10 days or 11 days. So this shows you the gravity of the humanitarian situation, which is compounded by the destruction of over 50% of Syria's infrastructure and the absence of the state right now and the state institutions and the capable services of the state institutions due to the collapse of the state. And now the new government is struggling to provide these basic services, including food and nutrition. Russia has halted its grain supplies to Syria on account of political instability and the fall of the Assad regime, and no one has stepped in yet in order to compensate the absence of the essential Russian grain shipments. And this is very dangerous on the food security of the Syrian people. So I think all of these things need to be taken into account. And all the countries, whether the United States, Russia, Turkey, all the Arab countries, Iraq, Jordan, everyone needs to act very responsibly with regards to mitigating the humanitarian situation in Syria, because not only is it a moral obligation, it is a strategic decision in order to prevent future conflict and bloodshed that will definitely spill over and adversely affect the neighboring countries and the international community, as well as we have seen when ISIS rose to power and took over half of Syria. We saw bombings, huge bombings in Manchester and in Brussels and in Paris and in Vienna and in the heart of Europe. Terrorism reached the heart of Europe because of the collapse of Syria. We do not want to see a repeat of that, let alone the countries neighboring to Syria.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Osman, an international relations specialist, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, as the situation in Syria unfolds, regional instability is further amplified by the escalating conflict between Israel and Gaza. Now, according to the spokesperson for the Egyptian presidency, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met with the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and also Brett McGurk to discuss pressing regional developments, focusing on the Gaza conflict and efforts toward a ceasefire and detainee exchange. President Sisi emphasized the urgent need for humanitarian aid to Gaza, particularly with the onset of winter, and reiterated that the two-state solution is essential for achieving lasting peace in the Middle East. The meeting also addressed the situation in Lebanon, focusing on preserving the ceasefire as well as developments in Syria, where President Sisi stressed the importance of maintaining the country's unity and territorial integrity. The discussions underscored its strategic relationship between Egypt and the United States. Now, to give us some more information about the complicated situation in Gaza, joining us from occupied Jerusalem is Dr. Munir Nusiba, a international law professor. Thank you very much for being here on Qnews with us once again. Now, how could President Sisi's meeting with the United States impact the situation?
The effort of Egypt since the beginning of this genocidal war in the Gaza Strip has been to stop this genocidal war in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, the Israeli government has been continuously rejecting all initiatives to end this genocidal campaign in the Gaza Strip. Israel has been continuously working on having a durable displacement within the Gaza Strip, and as they hope also to outside the Gaza Strip. Israel has now is continuing with the eviction and the forcible displacement of the population of the north of the Gaza Strip, including the Gaza City. They have recently murdered the last doctor who can treat bone issues and bone diseases and injuries as part of their genocidal campaign in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, it's very important, of course, what Egypt is doing in terms of trying their best to apply international pressure in order to end this. But unfortunately, the Israeli will has been and continues to be to continue with this genocide. And unfortunately, we are unable to see when this is ending. Of course, we are aware of the negotiations going on right now. I hope that these negotiations will end with a ceasefire, and that Gaza will be again rebuilt, and the civilian life will restart again in the Gaza Strip after this freeze and mass killing and mass destruction over the past year, more than a year. But this depends on on the amount of pressure that the U.S. is willing to apply on Israel.
Indeed. I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned a potential ceasefire there. There have been protests in Tel Aviv demanding a ceasefire. Does Netanyahu care?
He seems not to care, actually. He has been watching all these demonstrations since the beginning of the genocidal war in Gaza. However, he has ignored them. He has continued his military operations in the Gaza Strip and even widened them to other areas. You can see now that he's making his army also busy in occupying new territories in Syria. Instead of minimizing and ending the wars, he's actually expanding them. So as it seems, he seems to ignore all of these demonstrations. And unfortunately, I should also say that among the Israeli public today, we do not see such strong voices that would force him to end his genocidal campaign in the Gaza Strip. While there are, of course, thousands of Israelis who are protesting because they want the exchange of detainees, but many others find that the continuation of this military campaign is useful. Maybe it's revenge, maybe it's something else, but there is division within the Israeli community. However, these protests continue to be important. They show that there are among the Israeli community groups who would certainly want to see an end to this situation.
Okay. Well, let me ask you about Israel's claim that there are Hezbollah-linked weapons in Gaza. What's the relevance of this when it comes to the dynamics of the conflict?
Well, I mean, Israel has had the opportunity to control vast areas in the Gaza Strip over the past months. But the way it has been conducting its military operation has been that they destroy a certain place, enter the area, and then leave it again to bomb it again later. So it seems that they are designing their military campaign in a way that is never ending. Obviously, I don't know what types of weapons are remaining currently in the Gaza Strip. This is certainly not part of my area of expertise. However, what I do know is that the way Israel is conducting this war and the way it is using all of these justifications is as a way to continue this war and to never end it. Every time they would say, yeah, we find certain weapons here, we find weapons there. So they want to make the justification as if they are actually working on military objectives. The reality is that the main objectives that we are able to see in the Gaza Strip are civilian objectives. They have eradicated most of the forms of civilian life in the Gaza Strip, and this is exactly what is happening. So, but of course, in order to justify the war, they need to cite military objectives.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your insights there, Dr. Munir Nusiba, an international law professor joining us from occupied Jerusalem. Thank you very much indeed. While tensions rise in the Middle East, the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to shape global dynamics with its own set. So, as reported by The Guardian under the headline, Georgian lawmakers elect far-right anti-West hardliner as new president, the election of Mikhail Kavarashvili, a pro-Russian figure with strong anti-Western views, as Georgia's new president highlights growing tensions in the region. This development is particularly significant in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, as it underscores Moscow's expanding influence in the area and the potential ripple effects on neighbouring countries. With Georgia embroiled in political turmoil and protests erupting over fears of democratic backsliding, this situation adds another layer of complexity to an already volatile geopolitical landscape. And joining us now is Ivan Qnews, an advisor at the Ukrainian National Center in Kyiv, to discuss these critical updates and their broader implications. Thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. So with Russia's intensified strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, how is Ukraine managing its defense and also preparing for the challenges of winter?
Good evening from Kyiv. Thank you for the invitation. Ukraine, of course, know that Russia will attack our energy, probably for all those winters. So as winter starts, Russia starts attack on our energy facility. Yesterday, it was more than 287 different objects, 94 rockets and 193 drones attacking our energy facility. But, we could not say that the result of that attack was extremely damaging for Ukraine. Now, for example, I'm situating in the central television of Ukraine, and we have no problem with light, we have no problem with electricity. So it means that Ukrainian anti-rocket defense system much better compared to the same things in the previous and especially the 2 years ago. So Ukraine preparing for those attacks, Ukraine diversifying the sources of generating energy. So energy generating facilities really differs. If you look at the Kyiv streets or streets of whole Ukraine, you can see a lot of generators that help to our small business and medium-sized business to exist in these hard realities. And, for example, as of now, we have 4% growth of GDP. That is, as for me, very good result for country in the full-scale war. Thank you.
And of course, in recent weeks, we've seen Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian territory, a signal of a bold counteroffensive. How effective have these drone strikes been in disrupting Russian operations?
This war of Russia against Ukraine demonstrated enormous role of drones in the current war. I think that we should rewrite the theory of war for whole world, because really Ukraine used a lot of types of drones, create its own tactics of do that. That's why some countries accuse Ukraine in helping with a drone war for some other countries. I'm not ready to say whether Ukraine really does it or not. Nevertheless, taking into account the fact that we have war against Russia, we are of course helping to everyone who have war with Russia or pro-Russia politician or some Russian proxies. So that's why I think that drone really effective. They could not create the same damage as rockets could do, but they're more cheaper. And drone, it's a good weapon that can help a country without a big budget, like, for example, Ukraine in comparison with Russia, to achieve some results. Not probably such a good result, but nevertheless, they help to us to be in war versus the second army in the world for the third year. And I think that it's a very great result.
We're hearing that casualty reports on the Russian side suggest record Russian losses, yet they continue to gain ground in eastern Ukraine. What does this say about the military strategies of both Ukraine and Russia?
Yes, of course, we should take into account that, yes, Russia have success. We didn't deny that, but we should think about the price that Russia paid for that territory, because gaining new territory, Russia losing a lot of people. And if we little bit return to the history, first of all, to so-called peer victories in time of Roman Empire, we can recollect the simple fact that when you're receiving territory but losing people, it will be a moment when you will not have a people, but you have big territory without your army. And that led to the fact that you lose all the territory. Like Russia lost a serious part of Kharkov region in the year 2022, when very good strike of Ukraine, non-readiness of Russia led to that result. The same situation with high probability can happen now. So all those Russia victories could turn into peer victory, as losing their army, losing their readiness to have a war, and parallel, we see what's happening with Russia economy. I could not say that everything's good with Ukraine economy. We still have problems, but in Russia, problem much deeper. You could see the Russia main rate of so-called refinancing rate in Russia. It's 21% now, and will be on the 20th of December, 23 or 25. While in Ukraine, it's 13.5. For me, it's a good indicator that Russia economy is much worse situation compared to Ukraine, and that can help Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program, Ivan Yuvas, who is joining us, shedding light on these issues from Kyiv. Thank you very much. Now, the developments in this conflict are continuing, and we will remain steadfast in continuing to update you on these developments. And that's all for In Focus today. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned here on Q News for more updates.